Adonasium. Such a strange word. I remember when I first found it, when I studied the words of founding. In that moment, I thought little of it. Of all the incredible revelations that came in the wake of the destruction of the world of Ash, I was distracted. Now, all these years later, I discovered it was all connected. If you, dear reader, think for a second that I've been fooled into quiet worship and submission, you are woefully mistaken. Even if there was a god, he is long since dead. There are merely scraps to pull this information from. Yet just as scraps of a tapestry can yield a pattern, the grand machine that is the Cosmere is starting to become apparent. No one seems to know what Adonalsium was, except that it was incredibly powerful. It stood above all, and held the creative and destructive powers of the universe. I say it, because there is no indication that this entity had an intelligence like a sentient man. The scholar seems to think so, but she thinks a great many things that seem convoluted, that cannot all be true. She seems content to sit back and learn, content to watch worlds crumble and die, rather than using the knowledge she has. However, I am indebted to her. For each of the 2 times I have crossed paths with her, she seemed pleased to answer my questions. Unlike you. However, the scholar was not the first who told me about the Shattering, but the Wanderer. I met him just before I was called back to start these letters. I never learned his name, but like me, he seemed to wander from place to place. Something about him was off, and he seemed so focused on striding deeper into Roshar I almost escaped his notice. Yet when he did notice me, he seemed adamant that I listen to his story. I mostly had no idea what he was talking about until he brought up the death of Scadrial. He spoke of the powers of preservation and ruin, and called them by names I had never heard. Then he told me quite frankly about how these powers, these so-called gods, were once men. Men who had risen up against Adonasium. They had rebelled against it, shattering it into 16 primal powers. Wanderer didn't say much more than this, except to tell me that the people were slowly changed by this power. He spoke of Ati, who had once been a good man, who later manifested as ruin and sought to destroy all life in the universe by breaking it. His parting words were the only words he seemed to take seriously. He told me that history would be repeating itself before long, and that I would have to make a choice. Almost as if his words heralded some great tragedy, I could feel something change. Odium had come. At that time, I didn't know Odium or what he brought with his influence, but for the first time, I wondered if watching would be enough for me. It wasn't. As you know, I would eventually dedicate my very existence to fighting for the lives left behind on Roshar. The desolation that Odium began and the destruction caused by his Everstorm left hundreds of thousands cowering in the dark. I left my life of grieving solitude and took upon myself the mantle of leadership. Wanderer was also there, I assume fighting in his own way. And all this time, I was thinking about the 16 who had taken upon themselves such great power. Apparently, they dispersed, moving through the Cosmere and building up peoples and cultures across the stars. The worlds I have touched have been both crafted and scarred by their fumbling hands, the hands of men ascended. They created many great and incredible peoples, and gifted unto them investitures that allow men to touch the divine. But at what cost? For it seems they see fit to destroy what they create, that their shards have twisted them into intelligent agents of the shard's will and purpose. I do not understand it, but the nature of each shard eventually bleeds through these ascended men to overcome their personalities, twisting them into dangerous servants bound by their instincts. And now we suffer the consequences of their lack of restraint. Who were these people? What right did they have to become gods in the place of the thing they killed? Apparently this Odium has murdered several of his fellow shards, dispersing their power so as to continue his rise to domination. All along this path of power and control, millions have died. To these ascended beings, our lives must seem like ants in the dirt. When I see the destruction that ruin and Odium have been allowed to cause, I am resolved by one simple truth. These flawed gods should never have been. Tell our friend that I intend to fight until the lives of men can continue under their own wills. Tell him that the war is far from over, and that I will struggle against Odium and all other shards who fall. I do not feel that I can do much else than be a knife in the dark. I will gather the precious few I can save and set them up as a banner, to fight back however we can. I am unsure how to fight a god, but it won't stop me from trying. Be wary of this wanderer, a man who is far more removed from time than I am. He moves with a purpose that I cannot comprehend. It was apparent that he was well versed in traveling through the Cosmere, and has probably visited many worlds such as I have. I am grateful to him, and see him as a mentor of sorts, yet I cannot help but be cautious of his intent. Even now, I wonder if he hinted to me of the Shattering simply to recruit me to his side. Because of my choice, I am actively being pursued by the members of the 17th Shard. I do not know what will happen if they catch me, but as of yet I have not let them get too close. However, as I cast my thoughts back to the Shattering, back to where this all began, there's one thought that chills me to my very core. These 16 usurpers struck down a god. Something with, for all intents and purposes, unlimited power. Yet these men shattered Adonasium. What could mere men wield that could kill a god? And worse, where is this weapon that could lay waste to the powers of creation? This weapon could be more threatening than even Odium, for he is only part of what the weapon destroyed. Odium is the more prevalent of threats, but I fear more for the resurgence of this fiendish secret. For if the weapon can destroy a god, what unspeakable things could it do to the people of the Cosmere? This fight, what it represents, it has taken a toll on me. Perhaps I can learn to trust, to believe that such power can be wielded for good, that it won't corrupt the person who wields it. Preservation did try to lock away ruin, and even restored hope to a failing emperor, and Honor left some of his will behind, granting visions and nail bonds to his people. I am uncertain if what they offered us will be enough to stop the destructive shards, but perhaps what they did will give us a chance. Regardless, I have work to do, for I am determined to keep my people alive if at all possible. Until the next time, Elsric.
How's it going? Thanks for watching this episode of Cosmere. Hope you really enjoyed it. I also hope you really enjoyed the art. You know, I cannot talk enough about how fantastic the artists are who have been giving me the opportunity to showcase their work, along with my performance to make it all just come together so much better. Please, 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 you need to show them support. Check out the links in the description. I put them in order that they appear with their works. Check out their work. They've got some fantastic Cosmere art. They've got lots of other art from a lot of other genres that are similar and some that are different. But really, they deserve all the credit they can get. Please let them know how much you appreciate them sending their art and sharing it with the community. Tell them how much you like it and tell them that you hope to see more of it. It really helps artists to know that there's an audience out there that appreciates their work. And now I also have something else about the art I want to talk to you all about real quick. So I've been receiving a lot of messages from people who have enjoyed the first episode so far. And I love it. What I love even more are the people who are already spending time to try and figure out more about my main character, like who he is, where he came from, what he's doing, and that's really, really fun to hear. I love hearing all these theories, and I've actually seen several pitches that were pretty well done. However, there are people who are making a lot of judgment calls based on the art that I chose to use in that first episode. Now, I need to set a foundation really quickly right here about the art, because using the art to try and decrypt more about my main character is really not a good idea. Because I have a policy where I'm not going to use any work of art from any artist unless I specifically contact them. Every art piece you see in there is somebody who I contacted and got permission from dutifully and properly in the right channels, and I communicate with them, and I send them links every time I use their art, and I want to make sure that they get the love they deserve for letting me use their art in my project. So I'm never going to be using art like randomly. So I don't have a plethora of choices. You know, I only use the art I have permission to use, which means that even though there are so many fantastic artists willing to support this project, I still only have a couple dozen pieces to work with at the moment. Now, that number continues to grow as more people see these episodes, and as more people who maybe haven't tried like getting their art out into the scene yet take an opportunity to send art to support the project and the topics we talk about. It's going to become larger and larger, and hopefully grow to a point where I have a grand library to pull from with all these fantastic artists and continue to kind of make this big melting pot of talent. Now, but until we get to a point like that, you really cannot be too judgmental about the art. I'm limited in what I can use, and that's okay. I just want to make sure that you aren't drawing improper conclusions based on the artwork, because, for instance, the first episode was very heavy on Mistborn-based art. Well, there's a lot of good Mistborn-based art out there. As a matter of fact, it's probably the most prevalent art that you'll find if you do a search on DeviantArt or just Google in general. It's mostly going to be Mistborn art. Now, Way of Kings art is kind of on the rise, naturally, because that series is fantastic, but Mistborn is just more prevalent. So you're going to see a lot of it. Now, obviously I'm going to be bringing in as many different pieces as I can, and it's always going to be changing, but just be careful trying to use the art to try and depict or make fan theories. I guarantee you that they're not going to lead you anywhere. Now, thirdly, there was something really important in today's episode that you may have noticed. The name of the character changed. Now, this isn't too big of a deal for me, but I really want to tell you why. Because the name Eric was something that was very personal for me. As you may have guessed, it's based on the name Eric, E-R-I-C. But I changed it to be A-A-R-I-C, or A-A-R-I-K. I'm sorry. It doesn't really matter which way now, though, because... Oh, it was the K. It was the K one. But the reason why I did that was for many reasons. It was... Contextually, it made sense. Personally, it had a lot of meaning for me. It still does. So, I changed the name to Arik just to kind of make it more fanciful and to make it more otherworldly, so it's not so close to Earth, I guess you could say. However, there was something I didn't foresee, and that was the fact that Brandon had an actual character named Arik. I don't know exactly how many of you know yet, but this is White Sand. This is a graphic novel based on the Cosmere universe that just barely came out. It's fantastic, I love it, and it's got a lot of really interesting concepts and characters, especially Chris, who is like the traveling scholar. You guys should see her in here. It's really beautiful. The artwork is fantastic, especially. Now, I was warned after last episode by some people who I suspect were alpha readers for this project that I might have goofed, because apparently there was a character in the alpha named Eric, E-R-I-K, and since then Brandon apparently has a very similar way of thinking as I do, because he changed the name of the character and he did the exact same thing I did. Now, I want to show you in the book the proof that I'm not just lying through my teeth. Literally, this book came out 2 days ago from the filming of this. It came out the 28th of June. And so obviously my Cosmere came before it, but this was planned well before my Cosmere episode. Now, I'm going to show you the page, so if you're big on spoilers, just skip ahead 30 seconds or something, and I'll make sure, because I'm just showing one window with the name of the character speaking, so you can see it. So just go ahead and skip, and you should be able to avoid it from here on out. Okay, so I hope you can see that. It's just this little window here, and in this text bubble, you have this character in the cape who's walking away, and he says something to the effect of, he says something to the effect of, Arik's first rule of combat, go for the feet. But that's it right there. There's the character. I have no idea, and mostly because I don't like diving into things spoiler-wise. I mean, if Brandon asked me to be an alpha reader, I naturally would have read it, and naturally I wouldn't have told anybody about it. But beyond that, you have to remember, first and foremost, I'm a fan of Brandon Sanderson's works, and despite the fact that I love diving into Cosmere theory and diving into realmic theory, you have to understand that I like keeping the spoilers to a minimum. Now, stuff comes out, I'm going to read it, and I'm going to theorize about it, and I remember things really, really well, which makes me a good theorist in my opinion, but I didn't want to know anything about this book until it came out. And so when people were telling me, oh, did you meet, is this the character that Brandon was helping you write? I was like, uh-oh, because despite the fact that Brandon helped me write and establish this character for this series, it is not an official canon character. Now, could it be? That's up to Brandon. But I'm not trying to say anything about that. Ultimately, I'm trying to make a character that's realistic, that could exist in the world, and somebody that seems to fit in the universe. I did not intend to actually try and reinvent a real character, and I would never ever do that. So I changed the name. It's a very slight change. I keep with similar patterns that I wanted before anyway. Some of you may not have even noticed that I changed the name, but it is changed, and it'll be changed from here on out. I'm just grateful that the White Sand came out around the time I started this series, because can you imagine if I was like 100 episodes in and that came out? I'd be so upset. That would be really annoying, because the last thing I want to do is try and cause any confusion for anybody who enjoys this series. That's what this series is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be helping people who are confused be less confused, and people who are fans to not be too caught up in my stuff to not be able to enjoy Brandon's stuff. You know, it's his stuff. It's the premiere. Gosh, like it's really hot in here, guys. I'm sorry. So before I go, I want to tell you the theme of the next episode. The next episode's theme will be Investiture, which is a really, really fun and broad topic. Specifically, I'm going to go into the details of who uses an investiture and what exactly it is. So if you want to try and make an art piece for this, you can draw inspiration from people like Kaladin, Shalon, Vin, Elend, Marsh, Hexazid, anybody really who uses it. I only went for 2 series, and Elantrians, or Dakor priests. Oh, that's a fun one. I've never seen art of Dakor priests. I'd be interested to see what that would look like. But there's tons. Pretty much every book that Brandon has that's Cosmere based has methods of investiture inside the work. And I would love it if you guys wanted to show art of people using that investiture. You'd be surprised how many pieces of art are centered around people who are well known for using investiture, but very few action-based works. I hope that you guys can feel inspired enough that you want to share some of your personal works. And remember, you don't have to be an established artist. This is a place where I want to share any art that people can give. So if you have talent and you want to showcase it, even if you don't feel like you have talent and you want to showcase it, please feel free to contact me through my email, TheBlueShifting@gmail.com. Let me know if you want to share something, and give me a good place that I can send people who like your art so they can find more of it. I really just want to be able to make sure that the people in the community who have such fantastic talent get a chance to let people see it. And the way we can work together is it's just beautiful. Lastly, before I go, I want to make a quick plug. If you guys really like books and really like stories in general, I really invite you to check out the rest of my channel. I focus a lot on visual novels that tend to be anime based. I also tend to look at anime, obviously, and I'm also open to a lot of different potential things that I could do. But I mostly need to know if this is something you're interested in. As a matter of fact, if you're a fan of Brandon Sanderson on one hand and a fan of anime on another, you really are probably going to like my channel. And if you've never experienced a visual novel before, then I really encourage you to check the link at the end of this episode and just see what it's like. It's a pretty fun way to communicate a story. It's like a video game that's more like a comic. It's an interesting blend of the two, and it's really fun. I hope you enjoy that stuff too. But regardless of what you do, thank you for joining me on this Cosmere trip. I look forward to helping you in the next episode. I want to get your feedback, so please let me know if there's anything you want to see or anything you have questions about, and I will do my very best to contact you again. Usually, I could comment back the same day. I love it. It's so much fun. So thank you so much, and until the next video, I'll see you there.